bodybuilder spent 6 years building a body that looked dangerous. Bruce Lee needed 5 seconds to prove it wasn't. It all happened in an airport line, in front of 40 witnesses. And the most surprising part wasn't the fight. It was what Bruce did afterward. San Francisco International Airport, September 1972. It's 9:15 in the morning, and the terminal hums with the usual restlessness of a Saturday. The United Airlines line stretches back through a roped-off corridor, roughly 20 people deep, inching forward with the impatient shuffle of travelers who know exactly where they need to be and have no way to speed up the wait. Bruce Lee is third in line. Black leather jacket over a white shirt, dark trousers, sunglasses partly hiding his face. In his hand, a grey Samsonite suitcase clothes for 3 days, documents for meetings with producers in Los Angeles. His posture is calm, balanced, the posture of a man used to waiting. He doesn't check his watch. He simply moves forward when the line moves. A few passengers have recognized him, murmuring quietly, "That's the guy from the Green Hornet." The comments rise and fade without becoming anything more. Bruce doesn't react. In this moment, he isn't a celebrity. He's just a man waiting to check a bag on an ordinary September morning. The bodybuilder appears at 9:22. 28 years old, 6'1", 260 pounds. An amateur competitor from San Jose. 6 years of obsessive weight training have built a 51-inch chest and 22-inch arms. His face carries the certainty that comes from years of living inside a dominant physical presence. He's running late for his flight. A friend with a similar build walks half a step behind him. Both move through the terminal with the relaxed confidence of men who have never had to push through a crowd because the crowd has always parted for them. He moves down the length of the check-in line like a large ship cutting through a narrow channel. He shoulders past the first man in line, an executive with a briefcase who steps aside without a word. Then an older woman who clutches her purse to her chest and says nothing. He keeps moving until he reaches Bruce Lee and repeats the same gesture, the same sideways shove, the same silent assumption that the smaller body will yield to the larger one, the way it always does in public spaces. But Bruce doesn't move. His weight shifts, barely, a few degrees of rotation. The push finds no purchase, no resistance, no compliance. It simply doesn't happen. Bruce keeps looking toward the counter as if nothing had touched him, because in a very real sense, nothing had. The bodybuilder stops. This has never happened to him before. Not in public, not against someone this size. He looks at Bruce with the expression of a man whose simplest calculation has just returned an impossible result. For a few seconds, his mind seems suspended between two options: recalculate or insist on the answer that has always worked before. "Hey," he finally says, "I need to get through. Big guy coming through. Move." Bruce doesn't turn right away. He keeps looking straight ahead, as if the sentence hadn't quite finished existing yet. When he finally turns, he does it slowly, completely, giving the man his full attention with the calm of someone who feels no urgency to prove anything. He studies him for a moment over the rim of his sunglasses, then he takes them off, unhurried, and tucks them carefully into his jacket pocket. "The line is for everyone," Bruce says. His voice isn't loud, isn't aggressive. It's clear, level. The voice of someone simply stating an obvious fact. "Wait your turn." The bodybuilder blinks. He had expected a number of possible responses from the smaller man, a quick apology, an immediate step aside, maybe a nervous laugh, the kind of reactions his size usually provokes without a word needing to be spoken. He hadn't expected this. The calm is more unsettling than confrontation would have been. His eyes run automatically over Bruce's frame, then back to his own arms, the same near-mechanical comparison that 6 years of gym culture have trained him to make. He estimates the weight, 60-something kilos, maybe 150 pounds with the jacket. He sees functional arms, but nothing that impresses him by the metrics he cares about. In his mind, every physical equation points to the same conclusion. This person should be stepping aside right now. "Buddy," he says, patience dripping with condescension. "I'm twice your size. Move, or I'll move you." Bruce's expression doesn't change. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't shift his stance. He simply answers, "Try it." It doesn't sound like a threat. It doesn't sound like theater either. It's closer to a quiet invitation, an open door, offered with complete courtesy, into a room the bodybuilder doesn't yet understand he isn't prepared to enter. Before the tension can build further, the airline employee steps in from behind the counter. "Gentlemen, please no confrontations here. Everyone will be helped in order. Please hold your place in line." The bodybuilder steps back. His ego isn't wounded yet. It's just on pause. He falls in line behind Bruce with the quiet impatience of a man who has already decided there will be another moment to restore the hierarchy he believes has just been interrupted by someone too small to challenge it. That moment comes a few minutes later. When Bruce sets his suitcase on the counter scale, the latch isn't fully secured. He'd been sorting through documents while waiting in line and hadn't fastened it back properly. The bodybuilder notices what happens next could technically be described as an accident. A large foot, moving clumsily through a crowded space, catching a piece of luggage on the floor. That's one version. The other is simpler. The bodybuilder kicks the suitcase deliberately, hard enough to knock it off the scale and send it sliding across the linoleum floor. The latch pops open and the contents spill across the tiled 2 shirts, a pair of training pants, a few personal items scattered across the floor of San Francisco International Airport on a Saturday morning in September 1972. With roughly 40 people watching, the bodybuilder lets out a laugh. It isn't a spontaneous one. It's the precise laugh of a man who believes he's just reaffirmed his dominance while keeping up the appearance of an accident. Then he adds something else, turning slightly toward his friend, pitching his voice just loud enough for Bruce and everyone within 30 feet to hear, without quite sounding like he's shouting. "Look at the little Chinese guy picking up his trash. Should learn not to get in the way of bigger people." His friend laughs. A few bystanders look down. Others pretend not to have heard. The airline employee freezes completely behind the counter. Bruce Lee doesn't visibly react. He kneels down on the terminal floor and begins gathering his clothes, slow and deliberate. These are the movements of a man who has already decided how he's going to respond and feels no hurry about it. He folds the first shirt carefully, then the second. He sets the training pants on top. He picks up each personal item one at a time and places it back in the suitcase with the same calm someone might use tidying their desk at the end of the day. The bodybuilder's laugh continues a few seconds longer, then starts to fade. Laughter needs a reaction to sustain itself, and Bruce isn't giving him one. Silence begins filling the space the laughter used to occupy. The man tries to cover it with another comment, something about how some people don't understand that the world has a natural order, but the words don't come out with the same confidence anymore. Bruce finishes packing, rises to his feet without hurry, and closes the suitcase with a clean, firm click. Then he turns and looks directly at the bodybuilder. The 40 people watching go quiet. Bruce speaks with complete clarity. "You're going to apologize," he says, "or I'm going to demonstrate why size without skill is just dead weight." He doesn't say it like a threat. He says it like a doctor announcing an inevitable diagnosis, like a fact. The bodybuilder stares at him. He runs the calculation again. 130-some pounds, 5'7", arms that by his standards impress no one. For 6 years, that calculation has always returned the same result. He decides this time won't be different. He smiles toward his friend, steps forward, and extends his right hand toward Bruce's chest, the classic shove, meant to establish hierarchy without quite crossing into open aggression. The hand never gets there. In the next 5 seconds, something happens that several witnesses would remember for decades. In the first second, Bruce's left hand intercepts the man's wrist and redirects the motion outward with an economy of movement so smooth that some witnesses would later swear the bodybuilder's own arm seemed to change its mind about where it passed, wanted to go. In the second, Bruce's right leg fires forward in a side kick aimed at the solar plexus. It's fast enough that the human eye barely registers the motion. The power of a strike doesn't come from the size of the body, it comes from how the entire body moves as one unit. It's born from what experts call the kinetic chain. First, the legs drive against the ground, then the hips rotate with precision, then the torso contracts. All of that coordinated motion channels the body's energy into a single point. The force begins at the ground, travels through every part of the body, and concentrates in Bruce's extended leg. The strike lands exactly where that energy transfers most efficiently, the diaphragm. That's why 135 pounds, organized into one perfectly coordinated sequence of motion, can generate more force than 260 pounds of untrained mass, where the body never learns to move as a single, coordinated system. Real strength was never about size, it's about efficiency of motion. In the third second, the impact reaches the bodybuilder's diaphragm. The muscle seizes instantly. His mouth opens wide, but no sound comes out. The air is simply gone, not going in, not going out. His hands fly instinctively to his stomach as his body tries to understand what just happened. In the fourth second, Bruce has already moved again. His left leg sweeps the bodybuilder's single supporting leg, right as all his weight is committed to it. The mechanics are simple: remove the base the moment the center of gravity is already displaced. The result isn't a slow, clumsy fall, it's a sudden collapse. In the fifth second, 260 pounds hit the airport floor with a dry, heavy impact that seems to travel through the room. He lies flat on his back on the terminal linoleum, conscious, but completely unable to respond. Bruce Lee doesn't follow him down. He doesn't lean over him. He doesn't add a single comment. He simply turns back to the counter, picks up his suitcase, and with complete composure tells the airline employee, "Sorry for the interruption. My bag should be within the weight limit." The crowd stares at the scale as if it needs several seconds to remember what it was doing before all of this happened. "Yes," she finally answers. 42 pounds. That's within the limit. She prints the boarding pass, her hands trembling slightly as she hands it over. Bruce takes it politely, nods a small thank you, and walks calmly toward the gate, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. Behind him, the bodybuilder slowly begins to catch his breath. It takes him nearly 2 minutes to sit up. His friend helps him while he tries to process what just occurred. When he finally manages to stand, he searches the crowd for Bruce not to continue the confrontation. He does it with the expression of a man whose most fundamental understanding of the world has just been corrected in the most direct way possible. For 6 years, he had believed that 260 pounds of muscle guaranteed dominance in any physical confrontation. That belief disappeared in 5 seconds. Years later, a bodybuilding magazine published an anonymous interview with a competitor describing how he'd learned the difference between aesthetic strength and functional strength after a public confrontation that humbled him in front of 40 strangers at an airport. In the interview, he said, "I spent 6 years building a body that looked dangerous. I discovered in 5 seconds that looking dangerous and being dangerous are two completely different things." Years later, the man would recall that moment with an uncomfortable clarity. In that same anonymous interview, he said what stayed with him most wasn't the strike, or the speed, or even the fall. It was what happened afterward. "The man who taught me that lesson didn't say anything," he explained. "He just picked up his boarding pass and left." That detail was the one that followed him the longest, not the technique, not the public humiliation, but the sense that for Bruce Lee, none of it had been extraordinary. It had been routine, as ordinary as checking a bag. 5 seconds. That's the number that defines this story. 5 seconds from the moment the bodybuilder extended his hand to shove him to the moment he lay on the airport floor, unable to breathe. 5 seconds that contained the entire difference between size and skill, between mass and precision, between a body used for intimidation and a body turned into an instrument. The bodybuilder had brought 6 years of training. Bruce Lee had brought 20. And the difference between those two kinds of work became visible in 5 seconds in a way no explanation could have made clearer. Decades later, every time someone in a gym mistakes the size of a muscle for the true capability of the body carrying it, the lesson is still waiting to be learned, because some lessons need a very particular kind of teacher. And sometimes that teacher shows up at an airport on a Saturday morning, wearing a leather jacket, carrying a grey suitcase, with the patience to wait his turn in line until the moment comes to teach.